Now more than ever, Americans believe in wealth redistribution. You ask them and they'll tell you. They've been studying it for years, and today I'm going to share with you why you should be concerned that your fellow citizens want to take your money. Way back at the tail end of the Great Depression in the United States, there was a little polling group called Roper that started asking people what they thought about taking money from their neighbors and basically redistributing it for the so-called greater good. I don't know that that organization exists anymore, but successor organizations, polling organizations that exist today, like Gallup, for example, have taken up the mantle of asking Americans, do you believe in wealth redistribution? And the numbers have been getting worse and worse. I'm going to share with you exactly what those numbers are and why you should be concerned and what you can do about it. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors, i.e. the ones that they want to take the money from, legally reduce their taxes, diversify and protect their assets, get things like second passports to make sure you're in the driver's seat, not your government. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So here's an article that cropped up for me in the minpost.com. The headline is, through time, polls ask Americans whether to tax the rich to redistribute wealth, and Americans have grown more open to the idea since the question was first asked, as I said. Here was the original question. For the very first time, way back in 1939, people feel differently about how far a government should go. Here's a phrase which some people believe in and some don't. Do you think our government should or should not redistribute wealth by heavy taxes on the rich? Now, some folks have made comparisons. We're in the 2020s. They've drawn comparisons to the 1920s about how too few people are getting wealthy too quickly at the expense of everyone else. And so obviously, 1939, you're coming out of basically the late stages of the Depression. And so you'd think people would be more open to that. They saw the excesses of the 20s. Many of them participated in it, but just didn't end up doing well in the long run. They had their margin called or their business didn't work out or whatever. But 35% said yes. So about 1 in 3 back in 1939, Depression's coming to an end, said, yeah, we believe in just whatever you want to determine. The question is redistributing wealth by heavy taxes on the rich. 54% said no. And so what I always think, by the way, is what does that leave with my public school math? Is that 11%, I think, who don't know? 35 plus 54, yeah, 89. 11% just don't have an opinion. This is like when they do, like, who are you going to vote for, Trump or Hillary? Like, whomever you're voting for, like, you don't know, like a week before, you're still like, I'm undecided, I don't know. How do you not know the answer to these questions? That's almost more concerning me that people say yes. But the Depression was ending, the article says, and even though the question didn't invoke the word socialism, the traditional American aversion to something as socialistic sounding as redistribution of wealth seemed to have survived the Depression. So even through the Depression, people were like, you know what, let's go out and make it ourselves. So that was about 80 years ago. The question went away for several decades, and as U.S. conservatism continues to rely on powerful traditional U.S. aversion to anything as blunt as the word socialism, Gallup started asking the question again in 1998, and they've asked it several times in recent years. Here's the language. Do you think our government should or should not redistribute wealth by heavy taxes on the rich? Americans have grown more open to the idea since 1939 of doing that. So, back in 2007, about 15 years ago, the answer yes has consistently beaten the no, according to this article. 7 out of 8 times, but by tiny margins. Okay? And the percentage of respondents who said yes to redistributing wealth by heavy taxes had never scored more than 52%. So it was a squeaker, right? A small number of people were extra in favor of it. And by the way, remember what Mitt Romney said? They got him in so much trouble a decade ago about the 47% who pay no federal income tax. Right? I'm not a politician, so I can say, hey, if you think that everyone else should be paying their fair share, if that's the hill that you're crying on, if you believe that other people should be paying tax to support things that you benefit from, then maybe you should at least kick in something. Maybe it's $100. Maybe there should be a minimum tax. People talk about a maximum wage or how much money you should be allowed to. Believe me, there's people in the U.S. who want to cap how much money you make. How about a minimum tax? How about you chip in $100 just so you can put the flag pin on and say, hey, I'm paying for my services. I'm for the military. Hey, I chipped in my $100. I'm for schools and roads and bridges and all that stuff. I chipped in. Nothing wrong with not wanting to make a lot of money. Nothing wrong with having a tough time in life. Totally support that. But when you go out and say everyone else should pay while you don't pay, isn't it interesting how those numbers largely match up? And the number of folks who isn't paying in the United States got up to close to 2/3 in the pandemic, and now it's back into the 50s. So it is getting bigger. Now, they did some of those studies, 2013, 2015, 2016. It squeaked by. Now, they are up to 52%, and my understanding from what I can interpret from this is the trend is getting to where basically the margins are getting wider, okay? And so obviously you're seeing a lot of Republicans, people who lean Republican. I think that the most that they've said, let's do that, is 34%. Obviously it's more people who lean Democratic, up to 79%. And so it seems like the margins have been increasing, and maybe it's going to struggle to get above 52%. But what I can see is you've had more and more people not paying any tax. Again, hey, not saying there's anything wrong with that in and of itself. But don't you get tired of living in a society where politicians wave their finger in your face and say you're not doing enough? If I live in the United States, I pay a lot of money. I paid a lot of money before. I make more money now. I'd be paying a boatload of money in taxes, and yet Bernie Sanders would say, because he wants to compare me to Jeff Bezos or some guy running a hedge fund or somebody taking advantage of carried interest, which, by the way, they couldn't even get rid of. They have the presidency, they have the Congress by the narrowest of margins, they couldn't even get rid of it. If they're so opposed to it, they didn't even deliver for their own people. But they want to lump you and they want to lump me in with those kind of folks, when the reality is you're just running a business. Maybe you have some ways to reduce your tax, maybe you take some deductions, but you're going from what should be 45% all in with your federal, your state, your city, your Social Security, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you're going down to 41 or something. Maybe you move to Florida and you get down to 37. Ooh, you're only giving up 37 cents on the dollar. And so people in the United States, and I think you could do the same thing in Canada. We've shared studies with you where one of them was like as much as almost 80% of folks were in favor of some version of a wealth tax, right? Another one that I've talked about is, should we tax our citizens who don't live here? Oh, that's the ultimate one. Even Republicans are in favor of that. I mean, you could just look at all kinds of studies on that. Even people who are against high taxes, especially in the United States, are like, if you don't live here, to hell with you, right? You unpatriotic jerk, you want to go live somewhere else. People really don't understand it, right? I talked to a friend of mine recently who lives in Asia, and he had a friend of his back home say like, oh, are you there for because you want to date 16-year-olds? It's like, what? That's the mindset some people have. They've never left the United States. And that's most people, by the way. And that's maybe the disadvantage that countries like the US have, is because people don't travel, and then they think that's the only reason you live in Asia. That's the stupidest thing ever. And yet those people get to have a say. They get to vote just as much as you do, and they get to say, hey, you know what? Let's redistribute wealth by taking it in the form of taxes. Could be higher income taxes, could be new taxes, could be, retroactive taxes. Let's go back and tax you what you should have paid. Let's tax your unrealized capital gains, which is kind of a form of retroactive taxes, right? Let's go back and tax you on wealth. Time and time again, especially in California, as well as in the US, Canada scores even higher. You're seeing creeping up numbers in New Zealand. If you live in a Western country, this is the trend. The politicians have been doing a good job over the last decades of creeping towards the idea that everyone successful is a problem. Why? Because the politicians want more power. If business and private enterprise succeeds, as it does in places like Singapore, then they're going to be out of business, right? Because the system in countries like theirs is a little bit different than countries in Singapore. And yet, how is it that Singapore has grown so dramatically in the last 6 decades while they've been going in the wrong direction? The United States economy is less free now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 50 years ago. Why is it they're getting beaten by Singapore? Why is it they're getting beaten by post-communist countries? And yet they want to keep doubling down on the stuff that didn't get them to be successful in the first place. They want to do the stuff that didn't get Singapore to the top, that didn't get Dubai to become a place where entrepreneurs are flocking to. Even look at Puerto Rico in their own country. You can move there and dramatically reduce your own taxes as an American or someone in the US. And yet, hey, they want to shut that down because they don't like the competition. They've become a monopoly, basically, these Western countries, living off of what I call their legacy brand. And so the people are buying into that. They forgot what got them to the top. I think the average American studying the economic history of Singapore, forget it. All they know is times are getting tough because more jobs are going to the countries that I'm living in. People's standard of living where I'm living is going up, and so they wanted to redistribute your wealth. That should concern you. Now, the ultimate escape hatch is you have a second citizenship, and one day you say, forget it. Why do I want to wear the same flag pin as a bunch of people who hate me? And I can tell you, just watching from afar, there's a lot of hatred that's coming in Western countries towards people who run businesses. You run a business with 2 employees, okay, you're a good guy. You want to grow it to be bigger, where people actually have to come in and work, and they're running the business while you sit at home and collect your dividend check. Oh, that's the worst. Because everything now is about UBI, and everything now is about like a 4-day work week, and like, why don't we have like 6-hour days, and like life's not just about work. We don't want to get burned out working 29 hours a week. What we do if we have to work 29 hours a week? That's your culture. You think people in Korea are complaining about working 20 hours a week? You think anyone in Singapore is complaining? You think anyone no, they're not doing it. Your country's gone the wrong direction. So having a second citizenship means one day you have the backup option. You can get it by investment, you can get it by descent. Go and watch all of our other episodes on the channel. You can find out how to get second citizenship. That's the ultimate insurance policy that allows you to divorce your government. In the meantime, have a residence, have a place you can go, and reduce your taxes on your business, and particularly if you're not an American, on your investments. Have a place that's ready for you, whether you move there or not. Set up a company in a place like the UAE, go there a couple days a year, keep your residence, it's there, it's waiting. If you want to live there, it's tax-free, and you can go and you can change your tax home to there. Do that. In the meantime, have some money overseas, have a bank account, have some investments, open a brokerage account. Why is every dollar in one country when that country is tired of you having dollars or euros or whatever the currency is? Why do you want all your money in that country? I'm not saying hide it. If you have a legal obligation to report it, as a U.S. person would, you should legally report it. And you should know that you're a bit more secure than you were. And maybe one day you'll take further steps to, get yourself further extricated from the system. But I don't think the risk of keeping money in a Singaporean bank is any higher than keeping it in a US or an Australian or a Canadian bank. And actually, statistically, I'm correct, because Singaporean banks are among the safest on earth, and they beat every bank in the United States for that metric. So those are 3 things that you can do. We help people do that at nomadcapitalist.com. We'd love to help you. But understand the trajectory. This is what I've been studying since I was 12 years old. My father would bring home the Wall Street Journal and talk about all the different ways that people would move overseas, and the way the world's economy was going, and how Singapore was becoming this amazing success story. And I've seen things just gradually get worse and worse. This is an indication that it's driven by culture. Cultures where people believe in work, believe in wealth, believe in success, believing, as one of my friends in another country says, not looking in other people's pockets. Those countries are succeeding right now. Yours, people don't believe that, and you are going to pay more and more as a result.